Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry to Garver. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Whammo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the NBA and the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined as always by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, we just watched the first round of the NBA draft. The second round is currently going on as we speak. A lot of things happened.
Wow, Max, that's really all I can say here. I think we expected a little bit of chaos over the off-season overall. And chaos in general NBA terms at this draft, but the Suns have given us plenty to unpack here.
Yeah, I think the NBA community in general expected a crazy draft. I don't think they expected that every single trade would involve the Suns. So that was interesting. But so we're just going to react here. We're going to go through chronological order. The second round is still going on, as I said, so there's a chance Josh Jackson gets dumped into cap space at some point here, if any team would have him. But we're going to keep going. We'll break in with that if it happens.
It'll make the night if we get another deal while recording here, Max, because it would certainly fit in with the rest of the craziness. But yeah, I think we can safely keep going and keep one eye on the phones in case something blows up from Woj.
Yep. I have my eye on it. In fact, Indiana just traded a pick, but it's not to us, so we'll keep going. Okay, so the Suns traded, this is like, what was it, 3 or 4 hours before the draft? The Suns traded T.J. Warren and the number 32 overall pick to the Indiana Pacers for absolutely nothing, David.
Yep, and we tried to warn people about this one, Max.
I think I brought this up, not to pat myself on the back here, because I'm going to do a lot of not patting myself on the back pretty soon. But I think I brought this up a little while ago where I thought T.J. Warren into cap space was a pretty likely thing to happen. Yeah,
I think you were spot on with that. We tried to bring it up with a few tweets and pods in the last few weeks or so, and it got hot, I think, the night before while I was sleeping, or the day of the draft, I guess, the night before for me. Mm-hmm. There was a few rumored teams. I think Dallas was another. Yep. Eventually it happened, and all I would say is I think I tweeted something from Sam Vecini around the Brooklyn trade, I think it was, where he was essentially saying that a first round pick for around $15 million of dumping salary is around about the right cost. So in terms of the trade, you may not agree that they should have dumped TJ for a pure salary dump, but in terms of what it actually cost them to do so, I think it was, at the time at least, a pretty fair and reasonable deal.
People tend to... So here's what I'll say about TJ Warren. I understand why people like him a lot, because he does have a rare set of skills. We've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. He has a really good scoring ability. The shooting thing this year was nice. Problem with TJ Warren is you're trading him to a select number of teams, because no one who's bad wants him, and then no one who's in a big market who wants to use their cap space in the next couple of years wants him.
Yep.
So you have to find these teams that are competitive but like not great with their cap space, and so that's going to be Indiana. Was obviously perfect. Utah would have been one, but they already sort of made their big move. Dallas, I thought, was interesting. I think Dallas was probably trying to trade back similar salary of just a better fit for the Suns, but that's not what the Suns were looking for here. The Suns wanted cap space. That was pretty clear. And, I mean, we all thought it was for free agency this season, but as we'll get to later, David, it was really more for acquiring players today.
Yes, and we are going to get to that later, but I guess to preface that, it looks like, with a little bit of money here or there, Dario Saric and Aron Baynes, if he hangs around in the desert, essentially take up the space that TJ Warren vacated in terms of salary for next year.
Yeah, the whole thing, I think, and you're going to come up with a real calculation here, I think the whole thing, we get about $1 million total in cap space, so almost a wash. It really feels like they wanted to turn TJ Warren into players that they would have kind of wanted to sign in free agency instead. Mm-hmm. So they kind of did some of their work that they would have done in free agency early, and I think they did a good job. And again, we'll get to that. Well, let's go ahead and go to the next one, because I think actually you want to real quick just give, I guess, not really a grade, but sort of your overall feeling on the TJ Warren trade just by itself.
I mean, I think at the time I was very happy with it. It looked like they'd freed up $10 million in space for the cost of 32. We kind of spoke about last episode, even though it eventually ended up happening, we weren't sure whether they were going to take 2 guys in this draft and 2 more rookies. So at the time of the deal, without everything that we knew afterwards, I was pretty happy with it. And as you said, we've spoken a lot about his non-fit on the team in Phoenix, and therefore I wasn't too happy with supposed value going out the door for nothing coming back, Max.
Yep, agree. I think the key point here was that the Suns really needed to move TJ Warren because they just couldn't really bring him back. It wouldn't make a lot of sense. And the reason why the Suns may have got less value than people expected is just because TJ Warren's a tough fit. He's not an easy guy to fit around the league. Like, there's only a few teams, as I mentioned, that could trade for him. So they had to do what they could do, and I think this was probably about the best they could have done. But let's go ahead and move on to probably the most important thing the Suns did today. Not even probably. The most important thing the Suns did today, which was trading the number 6 overall pick to the Timberwolves for number 11 and Dario Saric. So without getting into what they did at number 11, because that's obviously the most controversial thing that happened, let's just evaluate this trade on its own, David. I know you and I probably had different reactions to this because of our different feelings about Culver. Where were you when you first heard about this trade?
In a vacuum, I really liked the trade, and I think at the time, even though hilariously there was a couple of things kind of back to back with each other where it was looking like Culver was going to be available at 6, and I got slightly excited about that, and 30 seconds later this trade dropped essentially, and I knew he wasn't going to last to 11, so that got taken away very quickly with this trade. But with that not in mind, I quite liked it. Moving back from 6 to 11, getting Saric in, I think he essentially, depending on what happens at power forward in free agency, becomes the starting power forward, fills that need. And as we're going to get into with a lot of these deals, I think they've tried to set themselves up for the simplest free agency whatsoever by having a few of these holes plugged in. And to be honest, I wish we kind of saw it coming, because I think we've spoken about a lot of these things in the past, and that they needed to address a hell of a lot of things. And I think we probably should have seen a lot of these things coming, and this kind of chaos at the draft. They've kind of turned things over a little bit. But, he's a theoretical deep threat. He's kind of dropped in his percentages recently, bounced around from Philly to Minnesota. Pretty good passer for his size. Games I watch of him, he's a kind of active offensive rebounder. So he brings a lot of stuff to that position, and a cheap contract, which I think, I patted myself on the back a little bit in terms of us bringing Dario Saric up in the past, and that was purely because looking at, unloved power forwards around the league that were on low money, he was certainly one that came to mind, Max.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm not gonna say that if Dario Saric was just a free agent available, and I told me that we could sign him for $3.4 million versus all the other options, I would say it's my favorite option, but it would definitely be in the top 3 or 4. I think that's a pretty good deal to have a guy like Dario Saric on, 25 years old, so he's not too young where he's gonna suck because he's a rookie-ish player, and he's not too old where he doesn't fit kind of what this team's doing.
Yep,
like a $3.4 million contract for Dario Saric is kind of exactly what you're looking for. It's kind of I actually think it's being a little lost in the night how nice this acquisition was for the Suns. Like you said, that the 3-point percentages bounced around a little bit, but he did shoot. Once he got to Minnesota, he shot 38%. He shot 39% last year. The whole year combined this year is 36. So those are pretty good numbers for a big. For what I can tell, I like to judge this stuff based on how much the team that he comes from likes him. Mm-hmm. And Philly fans seem to really like him. They were bummed when he got traded away, and I think that is a good sign. So I'm in on Sarge. I think that he is going to be a massive upgrade over what we had before. I mean, that's not really saying very much. We didn't have anything at the 4 before.
There was a giant hole at power forward, basically. So he definitely fills that need for us, and is an upgrade on nothing, Max.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And, it really is going to depend on what you think the difference between number 6 and number 11 in the draft is. For me, Dario Saric is more than worth it. Particularly if they would have done something good at 11, which we'll get to. But do you kind of agree with that, even though you're a big Culver guy?
Yeah, identical situation to Kelly Oubre, basically. They get a cheapish guy in under this year's cap to contribute right away, and then they're going to have around $9-10 million cap hold on him, the option of the qualifying offer as a restricted free agent. And as with Kelly Oubre, they're going to have bird rights. So the option, if he has a really good season, to potentially go over the cap if they're going to pay him more than his cap hold, which I believe is around that 10 million. I doubt he gets more than that, even with a great season with the Suns, but you never know. I think it's a pretty lean free agency class next season. I don't want to jump too far forward because we've got Nerdcast, obviously, next episode up, Max, focusing on this free agency. But I think if you're thinking about it from that point of view, and Suns fans are trying to get a view of this, he's very similar to the Kelly Oubre trade, obviously coming in for the full season rather than halfway through like Oubre did.
Yep, totally agree. All right, let's move on to the biggest thing that happened tonight, David, probably in terms of just the reaction to it. Like I said, I think the trade we just talked about was the most important thing, but this is probably the most controversial thing. Mm-hmm. The Suns at number 11 after Cam Reddish had just gone to Atlanta, and I would say this is not just me being biased towards Brandon Clark. It kind of felt like everybody in the world expected them to take Brandon Clark. Well, everybody kind of in the know on Suns Twitter expected them to take Brandon Clark, right?
Yeah, if you were just trying to read tea leaves, I think that's the way it was going. But I just rewind a little bit. I know we mentioned Culver a little bit before, but him going at 6 was a real shot to the heart for me, Max.
And wearing a Suns hat, David?
Yeah. The fact that that there is now an image, not a photoshopped image, but a literal image of Jarrett Culver with a Suns hat on is probably going to haunt me forever. And the fact that Mini took him at that pick and look like they're going to be keeping him, it's going to go on for 3 or 4 years here with seeing how he develops. And it's one of my friends that I watched the draft with kind of posed the question to me. It's a real tough one. I've kind of gone all in on Culver here. So it's, do you want to be wrong in terms of your scouting of the last few months and putting Culver at number 2 on your big board? Or do you want to be right? And that probably means that it's a pretty bad trade from Phoenix's perspective down the track. It's looking like a bad trade right now, which we're going to get into with who they took at 11. But that's going to be one for me to think over for many years to come, I think.
Yeah, that's never fun. Yeah, so let's get into it. They took Cam Johnson out of UNC. You've watched him more than I have. I know the highlights of him. He's a great shooter. Pretty solid on that. He's a pretty smart player on offense, at least. He's really not a defender, from what I've heard about him.
Yep.
Forward-ish guy. He's a guy who has size, but doesn't really play like he has size.
Yes.
So he's probably going to be... I mean, he's going to be nominally a 4 off the bench for us, probably, but really more of a 3. I don't know. David, where do you view Cam Johnson playing for the Suns next year?
I think he's going to be off the bench as a 3. I can see him playing with Mikal Bridges as a bit of a 2-3 combo. You're right. The defense is not good. And the defense across the whole roster is still not great here. I hope they really prioritize that with point guard. But I think Mikal Bridges is going to be trying to fix up a lot of mistakes from the whole roster at the moment. But I really like Cam. I've got to get on record here. I'm looking at my kind of rough big board here, which like you, after the top 10, it gets a little bit sketchy in terms of guys that I really watch full time and who I didn't. But I have him at 15. So this isn't a huge reach. Like, if I'm going to be upset about not taking Culver at 6 because I have him at 2, I also need to factor in it's essentially the same gap from 11 to 15 here with Cam Johnson. I just think he's a really smart player. Fit-wise, and I think Coles Wicker noted this on Twitter just earlier, he had him kind of hopefully going high to a more of a contender than someone like Phoenix, because I think that's where he would really flourish. But if you're looking for anything, Suns fans listening to this, with him, it's obviously shooting. I think he's the best shooter in the draft, and then it kind of all goes from there. Really high IQ guy. I think a lot of the stuff that I saw with him, I didn't scout him directly. I kind of saw him as I was scouting Kobe White games. They played on the same team and had really great chemistry together, actually. So super high IQ. Great screener, uses his gravity as a screener to eventually pop and get open shots or get his teammates. He can make the right pass, and a really good cutter off ball, actually, which I think is going to be a really good thing with this team with some smart guys like Booker and Mikal, obviously. So the shooting's obviously the one elite skill which gets him on the court. And I'm going to mention it again, Max. I talk about this all the time. You just got to have an NBA skill to get yourself on the court to hopefully then improve at some of the other things. So, overall, should have taken Culver at 6 and not done this trade, in my opinion. Probably shouldn't have reached to 11 for Cam Johnson, but it's not the end of the world. The age and the health are what is going to make it a really bad trade for Phoenix down the track with Cam if those two things don't work out and we don't see more improvement out of him.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so interesting about this. I kind of liked him too. I didn't even scout him or be on the show as much as you did, but I did have the guys that I liked later on that I had seen a little bit of, and he was one of them, mainly because I'm just a big shooter guy. You know, I love Andrew Shamet, obviously. I'm just really big on shooting because it's sort of important in the modern NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So he's somebody I had my eye on. It was just kind of shocking to see him go at 11 because, you know, no one ever even talked about him as being in the teens, really. Much less number 11 overall.
Yeah.
And really, to me, what it came down to, and everyone knows this, I'm not going to labor this point, it's just that I had Brandon Clark number 2 for the Suns this entire draft. So the fact that I thought they were going to be able to pull off something where they traded down to 11, got Saric, and got Brandon Clark, and got those two guys to play power forward for them.
Yes.
That would have been, in my mind, perfect. It would have been great. And I just kind of feel like they punted on a really nice opportunity.
Yeah.
One thing, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, David, I'm seeing some indications. Have you seen much of this of the Suns possibly buying out Aron Baynes, who I'm sure everyone here knows that we're going to get him in that trade? Why would they do that? What's the point? They don't save any money doing that, do they?
I did worry that this was going to be the case because the rumor with Aron is, you know, he opted into his $5 million to help Boston out, and now that Horford is leaving, they kind of wanted to get rid of him and send him to a contender. So, you know, players and agents control everything here. The team really should be, wanting him as a $5 million backup on this team because he would be great. But this was my concern. I haven't seen anything from it. I don't know who that's coming from, Max, but that is a blow because, I think there was rumored that the Suns wanted a big who could shoot. And he certainly ticks that box. So I was hoping not only with the Australian connection, but that he was hanging around.
Yeah, the tweet came from Keith Smith, who is not like an elite reporter by any means, but he's somebody who does report on things every once in a while, gets a lot of things
and has
right.
good Boston connections generally.
That's very true too. Yeah. So I might imagine the tweet says buyout. That doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like they would at least try to trade him for nothing first into a contender if somebody's interested in him. Like, why would you waste that cap space? I don't really understand that. Are they really that into Ty Jerome? They are willing to do that?
And maybe it's a lost in translation thing here. I mean, not to call out Keith Smith, but he did get something kind of lost in translation yesterday with the deal that kind of involved Phoenix because Milwaukee couldn't trade both of their back-to-back 19 and 20 picks. And I think some of these things get lost in translation sometimes. I think you make a great point that from Phoenix's perspective, they really should be hoping to at least just trade him into space for someone to make that space for themselves, or else it's looking like a worse deal for Phoenix. And I will get to this, but I don't love the deal overall. So it would be even worse for me with him not on the Suns.
No, I agree, and let's go ahead and make this promise. You've watched Cam Johnson a lot. I'm gonna make sure to watch him before our Nerdcast this weekend.
Yep.
And I'm gonna watch a lot of Ty Jerome too, and we'll talk about that in a second here, just to make sure I have like real opinions on them before we really talk about this. Ty Jerome watching is limited to watching Virginia win the tournament this year. I'm watching 5 of their games, which is a decent amount. And I really liked him. I never really thought of him as an NBA prospect because he doesn't look like one. But I like the way he played on a college court, so I'm going to look at him with an NBA eye and see what I think. But let's go ahead and get into that trade. So the Suns traded the Milwaukee pick for number 24 overall, which is Ty Jerome, and Aron Baynes. So when this trade initially happened, it wasn't reported together, and I kind of liked it. I mean, I like Ty Jerome. I don't care about the Milwaukee pick. Mm-hmm. So the Aron Baynes thing came later, and that is interesting. So I like Aron Baynes a lot. I think he's a good player. So if we're keeping him and he wants to be here at $5.5 million as backup center to replace Holmes, I think he's better than Holmes. And I think he fits better than Holmes.
Yep.
I like his toughness. I like he'll bring effort. Not that Holmes didn't. I just think Baynes is just he shoots too. He's just better for me with Ayton as the backup. But man, if we're just gonna eat that $5.5 million or whatever it is, that's kind of terrible, David.
Yeah, I'll throw this out there. I think 5.5 on a contender is a good salary for Aron Baynes. I think he can probably get more on the open market. Mm-hmm. Maybe they can do a deal where They buy him out for much less than that 5, and he's happy to kind of just go and throw himself out on the open market. It would be very risky for him as a free agent, but, be sure that he's going to get that money back. We saw back channeling with Al Horford essentially ceasing negotiations with Boston because he essentially already has a deal from 1 or 2 other teams that he's confident in. So maybe they can do that. You raise a good point with the Baynes stuff coming later. Could be that, he wasn't really a target for Phoenix in this trade, which is disappointing. And again, just a bit of a nail in the coffin for this deal overall, because I don't love Ty Jerome, which we can get into now if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and say what you think about him. Like I said, I watched him in the tournament, and I liked him as a college basketball player. I didn't at all think about whether he'd be a good NBA player or not. This just was not in my mind when I was watching Ty Jerome play.
Yep.
So I don't really have an opinion on that yet. I want to watch him a little more and think about him on the Suns and in the NBA in general. But yeah, you go ahead and give your brief little why you don't love him so much.
He really pops on film when you watch him. Again, kind of like Cam Johnson with Kobe White. Most of my Ty Jerome watching is when I scouted DeAndre Hunter. So, watching full games of DeAndre Hunter, Ty Jerome stood out quite a lot. So I kind of dug into him a little bit more, but it's just the athleticism. Mm-hmm. I love him from a basketball standpoint. Great college player, really stands out, makes great reads, pretty good shooter, and pretty good passer as well. But yeah, just the overall athleticism. Spoke again to Cole Zwicker about this, and he raised some red flags for me in terms of whether that's going to be able to translate to the NBA. So, it's funny. I think he's definitely a James Jones guy, and I think we're seeing with both Cam Johnson and Ty Jerome here that he certainly has a type as a GM.
Yeah.
And I think, we also knew that they were going to gut this team and try and create it in their own image a little bit, because the old team is very much in the old GM's image here. Very much a mess, but, and they were going to do it at any cost. So I tweeted earlier today, I think all of these deals, if you just look at them from a pure value standpoint, Phoenix right now are probably going to look like losers in all of them, but they're really, were charged with the task of turning this roster over in their image, and they're kind of taking the L every now and then on these deals, I think, to just kind of get the roster where they want it to be, if that makes sense, Max.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think this is James Jones and, to a lesser extent, Jeff Bauer, although not too much of a lesser extent, because I think he's the one behind the stupid Cam Johnson pick.
That story just, oh man, Max.
Yeah, dude, that was even the worst part about it, I think, wasn't it?
I don't know how much that's just PR spin and crap from Woj.
If that's PR spin and that's being released by the Suns, guess what? Major failure, because it did not help.
Terrible.
But I'm looking at, so while you were speaking about Ty Jerome, I was looking up because you mentioned his measurements, athleticism. Not good at all, David. You weren't kidding. He has a negative wingspan.
Yep.
Which is bad. His vertical leap is hilarious. It's probably like mine, which is really bad. His speed score, not good. He's basically just a non-athlete, from what I can tell. Mm-hmm. So, and listen, the dude is crafty as hell. That's kind of what he makes his name on. He knows how to do it and make his moves. He knows how to get to his spots. But, like, you really have to be an outlier in that kind of stuff to succeed in the NBA if you're this bad of an athlete and this, you measure this poorly. So, yeah, we'll see, man. That's going to be tough. And I imagine, he's got to be one of those guys who's a scrappy defender, but, like, not actually going to be a good defender because he's way undersized and unathletic, right?
Yeah, and 40% from three. Cam Johnson over his college career in 5 years shot also 40% from three, and more recently 45%. So again, another thing we probably should have seen coming here. They needed shooting, they wanted shooting, and they got shooting. It just, for me, in both Johnson and Jerome here, they've kind of got it at the sacrifice of, very little athleticism. We didn't touch on it that much with Cam Johnson. You did a little bit, but, not a lot of shake with Cam Johnson. Huge for his position, which is great, but, not a great athletic defender for guarding guys the same size as him, and really struggles then when he tries to guard down position on smaller guys too. And yeah, Jerome's scrappy, but isn't going to be an impactful guy on that end either. So you're putting a lot of pressure on DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker. And, I'll put my hand up. I've said before, the game becomes very simple if DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker pan out as they're supposed to, because it should be, a pick and roll with them two, with McCall on the wing, maybe Cam Johnson on the wing, and a few other guys, coming in and out off the bench. But you're putting a lot of pressure on those two guys by picking guys like this as your rookies coming off the bench, Max.
Oh, man, I actually came into this feeling like I was a little bit higher on this, and this conversation's made me lower, David.
I'm sorry, but I think you said it perfectly. For the ride, for just us two personally, and I'm sure a lot of people who follow us were feeling the same thing, is for me the kick in the guts was Jarrett Culver falling to 6 here, and then after that I think the kick in the guts for both of us, but more so you in particular, for me it was more of okay, there's at least a plan B here, and we might get Brandon Clark at number 11. They've just gone and done things that we weren't really expecting. So our initial reaction here is still not great. Cam Johnson, didn't bring it up before, but I'll just bring it up now. I think for him, they probably wanted to trade back a little bit further, and were hoping that they might be able to get a team interested in 6, and then the Cam Johnson pick looks a little bit better, because I think he would have lasted at least a little bit longer into the late teens. So as we just see that Bol had been considered a top 5 pick from Wodge and is still on the board at 40. I got that prediction right last episode. I believe I said he'd slide into the second round, Max. So
yeah, not only second round, man. He might be going. Is there a chance he goes undrafted? That would be incredible.
It's getting more and more likely, but I think someone will take a shot, surely, unless the background stuff that we have no idea about is just really red flaggy with Bol, which few people have alluded to that it kind of is. But yeah, we got some of those predictions right, but as I was saying, we didn't get a lot of these Suns predictions right, and I think that's why we're left feeling a little bit concerned with this overall draft, even though they have ticked off a few boxes that they clearly wanted to, and I think they've made their free agency a lot easier in a week's time, and will be pretty easy for us to talk about on the next episode, because I think there's really just one glaring hole now with maybe some other things that they want to do. But yeah, overall, I'm not feeling great about it, just because of those kick in the guts with both Culver and Brandon Clark. And, maybe we have ourselves to blame for being too in on those guys and reading too much of the tea leaves, because another note I have here is that workouts clearly mean nothing, Max, because they went to Texas for Jarrett Culver. He was there at 6. They'd already traded the pick, so weren't interested in that. And then everything looked pretty good for a Brandon Clark trade back, given that they had him for only one of 3 workouts. So that was looking like it was an easy bet to make. And then they pulled this curveball with Cam Johnson, which is just, bewildering. Obviously, we should note Brandon Clark slid a fair way back in the end. I think he went at 21 to Memphis, which we should say, him and Triple J, God, home run.
It's incredible. They're going to be the best defensive front court in the entire NBA at some point. They're going to be awesome, because the one problem with Brandon Clark, as everyone likes to point out, is his wingspan. And guess what JJJ's got? Got the wingspan.
Yes.
And so those two together are also both just brilliant instinctual defenders. They're just going to be insane, David. That's going to be awesome to watch. I'm excited for that, even though it's not the Suns, obviously. I kind of feel like this is the second year in a row. I'm not even going to say it because I don't want to be a bummer. Let's make fun of another team then. Can we make fun of another team just so we can get some of this hate out?
I think we need to.
I want to make fun of Atlanta. Can we make fun of Atlanta real quick?
Ooh, terrible. They deserve it.
What are they doing? They traded so much to get to number 4 for DeAndre Hunter. Somebody on Twitter tweeted out something like, man, they really did that just to get Jay Crowder, number 4.
Yep.
It's like, come on, man, what are you doing?
If you're following along with the highlights package, whilst they mentioned Kawhi early on, they eventually settled on Jay Crowder as the comp. And a buddy of mine who I was watching with actually kind of said, if we did a redraft of Jay Crowder's draft, I haven't looked at it since, but is there absolutely any way he would go at number 4 or even really in the lottery in that draft? I'd have to look at it, but it would have to be a pretty bad draft for him to even be a top 10 pick, I'd imagine, even with everything that we know since. So yeah, bit of a reach for DeAndre. Puts a hell of a lot of pressure on that kid, kind of like the Trae Young deal last season, which, Trae came out the other side of it and made it look pretty good for Travis Schlenk. But yeah, Hunter's going to have to be an otherworldly player for this deal to come off, because they essentially sent 4 picks to get it done.
Yeah, I just don't get it. It's like Atlanta has such a good thing going on. Like to give up all that just to get up for DeAndre Hunter, who I've said before, like he's somebody you're excited to get in the late lottery in most drafts, or even later, like as like a nice wing who might be able to shoot. Like the dude's not like a super good field basketball player. He's the kind of guy who just plays a role for you. Just trade up for him in this draft. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought the big trade up candidate was going to be Darius Garland, who Cleveland just decided to take and put with Sexton, and then I think they later grabbed Kevin Porter Jr.
Yep.
So they're doing interesting things over there in Cleveland. I don't know if you want to comment on that or not.
I called him the Rat Pack, as I said last episode. Rat Bag was my nickname going into the draft for Kevin Porter Jr. because of that little front rat tail that he has, and also Rat Bag is a slang Australian term for someone who's got some misdemeanors off the court, shall we say. But as you know, Colin Sexton's got that back end rat tail in his hairstyle. The two of them together, the Rat Pack in Cleveland. I don't love that fit, but particularly throwing Garland in there as well is pretty odd. But again, they gave up 4 second-round picks, I think, just to take Kevin Porter Jr. So some odd trades there for sure, even if Phoenix maybe takes the cake with the worst one of the lot on draft night, at least so far, Max.
Yeah. I'm looking down the board now to see if there's anybody else I can make fun of. I guess we can make fun of Washington for taking Rui a little bit. That's kind of a weird pick. I don't really understand that.
Yep.
Let's real quick. Let's go to winners. No, wait. One more thing I want to go on to. Sorry, I'm a little scattered here.
No worries.
Remember when everyone was convinced that Kobe White was guaranteed to be the Suns' pick?
Yes.
Don't listen to this bullshit. It's BS, man. Especially now that McDonough's out. We're not gonna have to believe anything that James Jones says, man. I'm not even sure James Jones knows who they're gonna pick, so I'm not sure how he can tell anybody else.
Yeah, shout out Gambo, another horror draft for him.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we really need to say on that. But yes, we learn something every draft, whether it's with scouting and then what we find out after, or just these rumors, and definitely learned to pay far less attention to all that stuff because there's always a reason for it. And we had no inclination that Cameron Johnson was going to be a pick for the Suns other than maybe with pick 32 or a trade up, which was something that I was going to be a fan of if they did that. But, looking at the back end of the first round, particularly in mind with the Suns getting rid of that pick 32 in the end, there wasn't anyone kind of like a Grant Williams or a Brandon Clark or, even Nasir Little who fell to 25. But, there's not a lot there that in hindsight now would have been there for the Suns at pick 32. So again, that probably helps the TJ Warren trade to some degree, at least, Max. But yeah, Ty Jerome, that kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. I guess we didn't really discuss that was for the Milwaukee pick, which is 2020. And, with how good Milwaukee is, probably going to be a pick around that range.
I tweeted that I'm actually glad that they traded this thing just so we can stop talking about it.
Yes.
It's such a worthless asset that everyone pretends it has value. It doesn't have any value. It's stupid. This is the value it had.
Yep. Imagine watching this draft as Ryan McDonough, Max, instead of us.
Dude, that would have been actually way more fun.
Yeah.
We could watch all his stupid assets get traded away. TJ Warren for nothing. Milwaukee pick for a little white point guard who has no athleticism. That'd have been awesome.
Yep, James Jones has clearly made his stamp for better or worse on this roster and just throwing out all those assets that McDonough took so long to acquire. So, I don't know what else to say on the Suns draft overall. I'm not feeling great about it right now. But I will say hate towards the Suns as a team. Going to try and fully support Cam Johnson and Ty Jerome. And I'd probably like that Ty Jerome deal a little bit more if Aron Baynes sticks around. So I'm hoping that the next 24 hours are a little bit clearer on that one for us, Max, because...
Yeah, so I'm on. So it seems like everyone's leaning towards buyout. I'm talking with Saric right now, who seems convinced they're going to have a full buyout where Aron Baynes gives back all of his money to become a free agent. We'll see. I don't know if I can remember that ever happening before.
No, but that's kind of what I was alluding to before, because the Suns really shouldn't be just letting him go for no reason other than I know players and agents really run things at the moment, can really force their way out of teams, which is a little bit of a bugbear of mine. But, it kind of filled a need that they were talking about with a backup big that could shoot a little bit, and even from deep. He's pretty good from the corners and things, Aron Baynes. So, and the biggest thing for me, obviously, is the Aussie connection, even though I called him a bit of a pretend Aussie because he was actually born in New Zealand, Max, but plays for our national team. So I finally got an Aussie on the team for a hot second.
Congratulations.
But he also would be a great mentor for DeAndre Ayton. And I think something we've spoken about with Holmes in the past is that, great that they have a great relationship, but Holmes isn't the type of guy that's going to help Ayton develop, I don't think. Whereas Baynes would, pardon my French, but beat the shit out of it in practice every day. And I think that would really toughen up DeAndre. So, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I think reading everything, it getting announced a little bit later, kind of just seems like a throw-in to help Boston out, which I don't love.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, listen, if it really is going to be him just being totally bought out, then it's basically just a non-entity. It just doesn't matter. It should have been reported. But, if he sticks around, I'm with you. I tweeted that I love Baynes. I do love Baynes. We've talked about him before as a target for the Suns. I like that guy.
Yep.
I think he was part of our last offseason preview.
Yes.
Before the Celtics got him back.
And that's probably where Saric came in at some point too.
I'm
with
sure
with a trade for a cheap guy. So yeah, we definitely like both of the vet guys that the Suns brought in, but who knows what's going to happen there, Max.
I just want to make a couple more points and then we can close this out. I think tonight's events, especially the Ty Jerome thing, either Melton or Okobo's gone probably, or maybe both. Next season. They can't have this many young guys at point guard, especially if they're going to bring in a point guard, which is my other main point here is, they didn't address starting point guard here, obviously. So I think that, the remaining cap space that they have, which maybe it'll be $5.5 million higher if Aron Baynes really is just going to be gone with the wind.
Yep.
But, regardless, we've talked about this quite a bit. There are ways for the Suns to create cap space. Now that they filled the power forward hole with Dario, Saric, and Cam Johnson, I guess, they can focus really just entirely on the point guard, which I think is a good thing. I do like how they can focus their attention on one thing, which is a veteran point guard, which you and I both thought is what they should be focusing on rather than a point guard in the draft.
Yep.
So that part of this is good, even though they did take a point guard in the draft, I guess, nominally. but not when they probably intend on starting right away, I hope. So, that I guess it's the biggest takeaway. And I think that, our nerdcast, when we go over all the options in terms of how much salary we'll have, all that stuff, I think the big focus for both of us is going to be how are the Suns going to fill the starting point guard role.
Yep, that's going to be the big point of discussion on the next episode for sure. A good point by you on the first year guys with Melton and Okobo. Wouldn't be surprised if both of them are taken out at some point, maybe as compensation for a team taking Josh Jackson. Could be a possibility. Now that everything's, once everything's settled, we'll know which teams have the ability to take on Josh Jackson, which will be interesting to see. That was our first question, I believe, at 7 seconds or less last episode with how many first and second year guys would still be on this roster. I believe you said 4 at the time, which was Ayton, McHale, Melton, and pick 6, or just 1 pick from this draft.
Yep.
We've now got 2 more rookies. And I think that spells trouble for some guys, along with what we were talking about with Jones just turning this roster over and making it his own. I think that's going to mean that, roster balance-wise, a few of those guys are going to be shed out. And I think you got the other thing right with question 2 with who was going to be traded. I believe you went with TJ Warren over Josh Jackson as the more likely chance. That was before the Josh Jackson news, which we're not going to touch on here, but everyone knows what I'm talking about there, I suspect.
Yeah, no, the only thing I'll add on the Josh Jackson thing, I won't get into the news, but at this point it seems just as likely that the Suns will be able to void his contract because of a morals clause than that we'll be able to trade him.
And then we had the worst and best dressed, which I believe you said Zion worst, which I think you were pretty on the money. I think Bol gives him a run.
I don't want to hammer on Bol right now. I feel bad for that guy right now.
He still hasn't been drafted, so this, the worst dressed plus maybe undrafted would be a worse night for Bol than the two of us, Max, I would say, which is a very high bar to hit. And I think you said Cam Reddish, who I didn't really take any notice of from a dressed standpoint, but there was a few people. I thought Brandon Clark was pretty smooth, and there was a few out there ones. The one for me, my Miami buddy again, who I watched the draft with, was not pleased with taking Tyler Hero at 13, and he basically had the Miami Vice colors in that floral suit that he wore, which I thought was quite telling, given Miami eventually picked him at number 13, Max.
By the way, while you were speaking, I looked up Cam Reddish. He looks awesome.
Well, just as you predicted. Just as you predicted.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's interesting, Tyler Hero. That's a very Miami pick, honestly. I'm not surprised they picked him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
All right, anything else we got to touch on? Should we just preview what we're doing next? We've mentioned a few times. We're going to do Nerdcast 2019.
Yep.
We're going to go over all the Suns' options in terms of what they can do with their salary cap. And then we're going to do our same thing we did last year, I think, right, David? We're going to do what we would do if we were the GM, basically.
Yeah, I think people...
And negotiate with the other.
I think people enjoyed that. So I think we'll stick with something that people had good feedback on, as we always like to do on this pod. So, yeah, maybe we'll come back with a fresher look at what's just happened in the draft, because this is all very raw right now and hopefully not too depressing for some people.
Yes, and on that point, I want to make my Nate Duncan-esque mini scouting reports on Ty Jerome and Cam Johnson. So.
I like it. Maybe to offset that, I'll go with my Gambo anonymous dot point scouting reports on both of them as well, and tell you why they're bad picks or good picks. Oh, and there we go, right to finish.
Oh, there we go.
Miami Heat. I'm going out to my friend as soon as we finish recording this, and he will be very pleased that they took Bol with the 45th pick.
Why the hell not now? They got Bam and they got Bol. What a team over there.
But yeah, hopefully not too depressing here, Max. I think, as I said, I think anyone who tuned into this probably knew as they were coming in that it was going to be pretty raw, that both Culver and Clark were essentially passed up on by the Suns. And, a weird situation. I kind of hope that I'm wrong in one respect, and maybe that Cam Johnson balls out, although very high on him as well, so I won't look too bad from that point of view.
You just do what I did last year. You root for Ayton and Luka to look good.
Yep. No, I'm rooting for Culver. I'm going to be, I said it the other day, I think really hard worker, and, a good situation for him, hopefully. So, it's gonna.
Hopefully they can get rid of Wiggins somehow. I'm a little nervous about those two. About Wiggins just taking the ball away from him.
Here's another prediction that, again, I'm stealing all my ideas off my friends today, but Harrison Barnes opted out of his deal in Sacramento. Andrew Wiggins, a king.
Ooh, oh my God, that is such a kingsy move. I like your friend's brain. I want to talk to your friend. That guy sounds like he has some good ideas.
He's a Portland fan, and was probably the only one that walked away in the room pretty happy with their draft.
Yeah, they got Nazir Little at like 25, right?
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, so he was very happy. So, yeah, I think we can probably end it there for now, Max. But we'll come back.
Oh,
with some...
hold on! Don't go to your friend too quick. Denver is acquiring. Oh, that's freaking rant. So now they have Bol and MPJ and Jokic, and what the hell? Let's see what's going on in Denver.
Going with all the sliders.
But one last thing I want to do before we close out is just preview the other idea we came up with for a podcast. We're going to record during the start of free agency.
Yes.
Like when all the deals are just being announced. So it's like, rapid fire. It happens at a good time for us when we usually record. So we can both get on. We're both going to do it. We'll react to everything. Hopefully the Suns will do something, but even if they don't, other teams will. So we're going to react to all that, as it happens.
Yeah.
Post the podcast right away. So we're excited for that. So next two podcasts, Nerdcast, Free Agency Preview, and then we're going to react to the Free Agency Live.
Yeah, the change in the rules has moved the time forward and makes it first thing in the morning, my time, Max. So that's going to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to doing that, because we're essentially going to do what we're doing now and just react to things as they come through, which will be very interesting. I guess I'll leave it on the fact that hopefully it is a better initial result to what I'm feeling right now after watching the 2019 NBA draft, Max.
Yeah, they can only screw up so much in free agency, right? They don't have enough cap space to do too much, I hope. We'll see. Famous last words. But that's it for us. Thanks as always, guys. Rate, review, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. I'm MaxMCC11 on Twitter. David is at The 4 Point Play on Twitter. David, thanks for joining me for this. I think my prediction, we're going to come back on our next podcast and be higher on this than we are now. That's my prediction.
Yep, and I'm going to spend all off-season being positive about the guys that we've brought in, and hopefully positive about the overall situation. But hopefully this helped you if you listen to the pod.
You can't be a Suns fan unless you're an optimist, no matter what life hits you with.